Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. I'm Andy Green.
And I'm Felix Schultz, and I've just interrupted you. Oh my Lord, I'm so embarrassed. We're not just the only people here. We've got two very special guests.
Not one, but two guests. We've gone intercontinental, Felix. Yes. We've got two wonderful gentlemen, some of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. They are watch journalists, automotive enthusiasts, and podcast hosts.
And people of integrity and steadfast morals.
Sterling gentlemen.
Oh, the best.
And of course, we are talking about Jason Heaton and James Stacey, known for their work on the Grey NATO.
Also, that little website you might have heard called Hodinkee.
Boom. Let's get them on the phone.
Okay. Well, it's an honour today to have our first four-way, three-time zone chat with James and Jason from the Grey NATO. Guys, do you mind introducing yourselves and telling us a bit about the Grey NATO and what you do? Maybe we'll start with James.
Oh, okay. It's the Grey NATO, yeah, for sure. So a few years back, 2016, Jason and I launched a podcast, and it does travel, adventure, diving, driving gear, and most certainly watches.
It sounds like you've said that before one or a few times. And
yeah, 108 times roughly. Yeah, 109 tomorrow.
Wow, congratulations. The milestone 109th episode. And Jason, what about you? How did you find yourself working with the lovely James?
Well, actually, we have to owe that to our friend Mike Pearson. You might know him. He was the North American rep for Bremont Watch Company. And, James and I were both writing separately for different outlets at the time. This was back in, must have been 2015 or thereabouts, 2016. And Mike thought it would be kind of cool for us to meet up, and he did sort of an informal introduction. And then James had mentioned that he'd always considered doing a podcast and had this brainchild. And so we thought, let's talk more and see if we can't put something together. And the rest is history, I guess.
Wow.
There we go.
And so obviously, James, I sort of first became aware of your work at a blog to watch, and Jason, you've been at Hodinkee since, a long time, and you've sort of been a few other places in between. Where did your interest in watches turn from sort of a personal thing into more of a work situation, each of you?
Should we always opt to go from East Coast to or Eastern time zone to Central? Maybe James, you want to take that one?
Sure, I can jump in on that. So, I got into watches out of university. I had a watch that broke, and I started Googling why it needed a battery and that sort of thing, and kind of went from there. And I spent, this is in the early days. This is pre-Hodinkee, pre-Time and Tide, really anyone. It was just kind of watchreport.com. If you can remember the days, right? Yeah. It was Watch You Seek, it was Poor Man's Watch Forum, and it was Watch Report. And I remember I was at the time I was spending some time in the southern states of the U.S. in Mississippi, and I spent all my time reading everything that had ever been posted to Watch Report. And once I literally read everything on the site, I got lucky because they posted, would you like to contribute to Watch Report? If so, send a couple options to the site. And I wrote up a few brands that I was very much obsessed with, and they posted this piece on Panerai. This would have been 2008, May 2008, something like that. Panerai was huge then.
Yep.
Really exploding out of a deep enthusiast core and into a more mainstream enthusiast, like watch enthusiast.
Yep.
So I went that route, and very quickly realized that this would be my opportunity to see a lot of watches that I would never either choose to buy or couldn't even choose to buy, but both options. And it seemed like it seemed like a great way to have a presence in a community that I'd quickly grown to love without being a forum maven, which was your kind of other option at the time. Dedicate your entire life to being the guy who looks over his newspaper every time a new person logs in, and that sort of thing. And I love those guys, and I still think the forums don't get the credit they need in building this community.
Yep, totally.
But the it very quickly progressed from there to being suddenly there was high profile watch blogs, not just watch blogs run by people who had other big jobs, so that would have been.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And as for me, I was wearing watches way back when I was a teenager, just out of enthusiasm, just thought they were cool. And then I got an English degree from university and started working as a technical writer, writing manuals, and moved from there into some marketing and project management jobs. And then around about 2009, I started reading Gear Patrol, the men's lifestyle blog, which had started up around that time. And they put out a call for freelance writers, and they weren't paying much, if anything. But I was working at an outdoor shop at the time, and I was kind of really into outdoor gear, and I wanted to start writing for them. And so I sent in some writing samples, and they hired me on, and I started just reviewing outdoor equipment like backpacks and skis and kayaks and that sort of thing. And and it was around, well, it was just before that I had gotten my first high-end watch, which was the Planet Ocean. I got that based on seeing it in Casino Royale, and I just thought, wow, this is such a cool watch. It reminded me of my old Seiko diver, but it was like this high-end, beautiful thing on a rubber strap, and I bought it. And then I thought, I need to really learn how to dive if I'm going to wear this dive watch. So I took up diving.
That's a good point.
And one thing led to another, and I started doing dive watch reviews for Gear Patrol as kind of an extension of the gear reviewing that I was doing. And at that time, Hodinkee was also starting up, and I think Ben Clymer was looking for writers too, and Eric Yang over at Gear Patrol told Ben, well, we've got this guy that might be interested. And so I started writing a few things for Hodinkee at the time, and that was around the time you were there, Felix, and Blake Buettner, and just a handful of others.
And Eric, and was James Reardon as well?
Yes, he was.
Reardon. Paul was there too.
Yeah. Paul Boutros was writing for them, and
was he?
One other guy. Yeah, it was the guy. Was Ben's friend. He was like a real estate agent, but he was into watches. Jeff something or other.
Yeah, wow.
And it was kind of a seat of the pants sort of operation, and I did my first press trip. I went to Langa and Zona for my very first press trip. And I visited them, and kind of it set the hook. I was kind of more of this, novice gear reviewing watch guy, and there I was thrown in the deep end. And then I did another press trip where I met Jack Forster. I was at some sailing event in Portugal, and I met Jack, and I said, "Hey, I like to dive, and I do these reviews. He was at Revolution at the time. And I said,
"Yeah, sure.
Would you be keen on like a regular column on diving with watches?" And he said, "Yeah, sounds good." So I started doing this column called Bottom Time every issue, where I took a different watch somewhere in the world and took it diving. And my wife was getting into photography at the time, and she started doing the photos, and kind of one thing led to another. Spool ahead of the years, and then I met James, and we started doing TGN, and here we are. So,
and the rest is history. Wow. Yeah. So we're going back some time, talking about a decade ago. What I'm interested in, I think James particularly, I've noticed, obviously knowing you for a handful of years as well, that your taste in watches has kind of evolved over the years. We're seeing a lot more gold being posted. How do you think your taste has evolved with sort of your industry experience and the deeper you've gone into the watch industry?
I think it's a mix of that concept of you're the reflection of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah, totally.
So I think it's a mix of that and just getting to a point with my personal. Heaton and I don't love this term typically, like watch collecting, because I don't think either of us really model ourselves as collectors, more just appreciators. But getting to a point with my own collection where I realized like I don't have the funds to move this to the next level, and just kind of my enthusiasm needs a home, and if I already have 4 or 5 steel dive watches or sport watches that I think are literally perfect for me, then I can either dry up and kind of like not have a new perspective to offer every piece that I come to, and I got to write a fair number of pieces in a given week or month or whatever. So I think it just kind of, there was a little bit of boredom, and then that's informed by kind of a new and growing peer group at Hodinkee who appreciate watches outside of what I'm used to appreciating. So if that's a vintage gold Grand Seiko or some amazing Patek Philippe, which I didn't at the time understand the history behind, something like the 5164R can literally trace its history back like 60 years. And even before that, if you trace the little pushers on the case side as a derivation or an evolution of the Cartier World Timer, like all that stuff is kind of intrinsic, and I like following these little lines. I like the specificity of it, and it felt like I came up in a time when gold was just so ignored. You know, if you imagine 2005, maybe getting into watches, the idea that people were buying gold watches is almost incredible. Everything was steel, everything was huge, everything was diving or dive adjacent, and had to have this incredible 60 or 70 year history. And there's a whole world that I had ignored. And in the hopes of becoming a more holistic, I don't know, presenter of this format of watches, then I started to kind of open my eyes to a few other options. And certainly I think it was just a couple of nice people who owned gold watches allowing me to wear them for more than 2 minutes. And I realized that they're like a lot of fun and felt entirely different. But you put on a gold GMT Master, feels vastly different than a 1675. But it also kind of feels the same. It's cool. I don't know. They're more fun, I think. And when you see the steel prices go completely out of control, suddenly the gold prices don't feel that crazy. This coming from someone who's not invested I do not own an actual gold watch. I have a gold plated watch that I really like a gold plate. But as someone who dreams and aspires to the idea of something like a solid gold GMT or maybe a second series AP, something like that, a Royal Oak. I think some of those are really fun, and I just worry that people in the same sort of demographic as myself are missing a whole fun phase, whether that's gold plated or solid gold or something else. And it's just a hope to become a little bit more well-rounded.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense to me, and certainly I think that that fun aspect is often lost in the watch acquiring and collecting and world, and I think that's a worthwhile thing to be pushing.
Yeah, the over seriousness is a big bummer for me sometimes.
Totally.
Like, don't get me wrong, I think that there's things that you can take seriously, like whether or not something has actual history or whether it's actually nicely made, like the quantifiables.
Yep.
But the tiny, I would be blessed just to own any vintage Rolex Submariner. I'm not the right guy to talk about whether it's a meters first or has the correct number of T's on the dial or whatever. I appreciate the specificity of that, but it doesn't affect me in terms of my appreciation of the watch as a whole. It feels too serious, and I think that there's a lot of fun still to be had in this, especially from simply finding a watch that works for you and then taking it out into the world and making it your watch. So much fun.
It's a fun journey to kind of go on, and I think I can relate a lot in sentiment. And I mean, I'm the same. I don't own a gold watch yet, but it's sort of, you kind of get on this path of ending up just lusting over, gold APs or gold day dates or whatever it is. But
yeah,
perhaps to mark the next big milestone, say a 50th birthday, Felix.
Everyone needs to buy a watch for their next birthday, right? Is that something in your experience?
That's what
Jason?
I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's actually really funny, Jason. This is really great timing, because last night we just got an email in from someone saying we sort of do a bit of a matchmaking, watch matchmaking segment on the show.
I'm sure the guys have heard.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Regular listeners. And someone's in like, I want to get a 50th birthday watch. What should I get? So I think I want to get Jason to answer that.
I in hearing what you guys are talking about the fun going out of buying a watch, I think what happened between my 40th birthday and my 50th birthday, which kind of coincided with this decade of ramping up into working in watches, was also the experience of actually going out and buying that Rolex Submariner for my 40th birthday has been lost. That notion of somebody just opened a bottle of wine, I heard, or whiskey or something.
Whiskey, thank you.
I heard the cork.
It's 8:30 in the morning here.
6:30 p.m.
No, but I just realized after I remember after getting that Submariner for my 40th birthday, thinking, okay, in 10 years, what's what's the next mountain to climb? What's the watch to get? And for a while there, I used to joke with my wife that it was going to be a Lange. I'm going to get a Lange for my 50th birthday. And then at some point, that notion of flipping and buying and selling and reviewing so many watches, it just became not the thing for me. And I realized how happy I was with the watch that I got for my 40th birthday. So, the circumstances of the person that wrote you and asked for a watch to get for his 50th, I guess I would have to know more about that person, whether or not he has a existing watch and what his tastes are and goals are. But I think to tick that box is the wrong approach, and I'm glad I realized that with my own experience.
I think that's the answer. I think that that's exactly right.
And can I just say, Jason, I find it really interesting, and I'm sure James and Andy will agree that really echoes my experience of sort of pre-industry buying and post. Like for me now, I used to buy watches because I like the watches, and now I think it's more the people and the stories still, but the personal stories is what will draw me to something. So I can definitely relate to that.
We get a lot of questions, and we joke about it from people that are saying, which watch should I buy? And I really like this, and between this Tudor and this Omega, which is better, and that sort of thing. And I go back to my old criteria that I had when I was a teenager. You put the watch on your wrist. Do you like the way it looks? Does it smile up at you every morning when you put it on, or when you go and wear it someplace? That should really be the criteria. These are very visual objects, and you can layer them with so many things, with their history and the pedigree and the importance of them, so to speak. But I think it's still something that should just be fun to strap on your wrist, and I can't make that decision for people.
Spot on. And look, we'll link up your article in the show notes as well. Obviously, it's a fascinating kind of perspective. We'll link that up. We get the same sort of messages, and I guess that's why we do choose to offer up that quasi-professional advice and enjoy trying to spend other people's money. But you're totally right. I think it comes down to emotion. But what I'd like to kind of do now is maybe switch gears and talk about something that's not watch related. You guys are much more diverse, and let's chat a little bit about cars. Let's dip over to James quickly, because I know you still cover cars, and I guess in a general sense, we know there's been a lot of stuff happening with the watch industry, but how's the car kind of scene looking to you at the moment?
I mean, to be fair, I'm more than a year out of covering cars as a role. It's still my number one most favorite thing to read about and to think about and that sort of thing. But I previously held a position with a magazine in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and that didn't hold once I moved east. More of a tight crew, an amazing magazine called Nouveau, which I highly recommend if you're into kind of arts and culture, especially with a Canadian perspective. If that's of interest to you, they do great work. I think the car scene, I mean, let's face it, this is a terrible time for car brands. What's going on with the fallout from the virus and the buying and the limited access to funds and the problematic leasing and the rest of it. This is a tough time for sure. As far as a product level, I think we were in a really exciting place. Let's call it 3-4 months ago. We saw Hyundai take the top prize from Road and Track for the Veloster, and this is still a great time to be an enthusiast in the car space. Vintage cars are strong and remain strong and interesting, and yeah, I think depending on I'm not really sure the touch point that you were hoping for with your question. I think that cars from a product standpoint are really strong. Cars, the idea of selling a car right now is pretty difficult, I think.
A few questions here centering around which you love more, cars or watches, and it sounds like the car element is a bigger passion.
Yeah, that's kind of tough because I would never. It's one of those things where you have to follow your heart. Like Heaton and I always say, if you're going to buy it, when you ask us what watch you should buy, it's always whatever one you like best and fits your budget and also meets your expectations. That's going to be the best watch for you, and that those expectations will change. in a year or 2 years or 3 years, likely. If you're a watch guy, they definitely will, 100%. When it comes to cars, it's a whole different concept because you're talking about something that you need a place to store.
Yes.
You need to insure it. You need to care for it. They require an incredible amount of maintenance. And the more interesting they are, like the more they would appeal to an enthusiast, the more problematic they are on a maintenance standpoint. But I think that literally at any price point, there's something you can have a lot of fun in, depending on. I think it just comes down to you having to understand: am I a car guy or not?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, look, we're both subscribers to the Hodinkee magazine, fantastic publication. I've got volume 5 sitting next to me. You wrote up a pretty cool piece with, I think, your guest from, not to date, this last week's podcast, Josh.
Yeah,
you
Josh.
wrote up a McLaren F1.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like playing with a $15 to $20 million car?
Yeah, so a little bit of a backstory on the McLaren. So I mean, the story that ended up in the magazine is a sliver of what I wrote, and that's how it goes with these things. They took the part that applied best to the photos and the scope of the magazine. But you think back to 1992 when this started to hit magazines. I was 6 years old. It was the only thing that I would read that wasn't like Jurassic Park. I would make my dad read me Jurassic Park.
Nice.
But yeah, I absolutely adored those books that when I was pretty young, but I didn't read any of them. I mean, I made my dad read them and filter out all the chaos theory that I didn't understand and that kind of thing. But when it came to cars, like I got into car magazines about that time, and that thing was the best. And the cool thing about it is sometimes you get into a time where the things are the best. Like, not to be unfair, but when I got into watches, Panerai was the hot ticket.
Yeah.
And they haven't remained the hot ticket. Watches ebb and flow always, and that's the way it goes. With cars, it was such a rare, such a limited thing, such a special thing, such a thing that was the product of like 4 borderline geniuses coming together and saying like, what could we make if we just made something with literally no excuses? And that's what I like. I'm obsessed with the McLaren F1. I'm obsessed with the A12 Oxcard SR71 program. The stealth plane. These are things made in a time where the right people had access to a literally unlimited amount of money to develop the perfect thing. And I like that. I like that at a level that I can't even kind of put to words. I think that's what makes something really special. And to finally like, I have the magazine, I can reach for it here from my desk. I have the first magazine that I saw the McLaren F1 on. I lost the original copy that I got back in '92, but a friend recently rebought it for me as a gift, a really kind gift. This copy, and it's just something that I adore. It's a no compromise product. It's this really special thing that's both of an era but oddly timeless. Yeah. And all of this is backed. Like, if you're rolling your eyes, like, look at what these things are worth.
Yeah.
This is a roughly $1 million car when it came out, and they took a dip at the absolute bottom. You could find one for about 650 grand. Yes. And now they're worth something more, like a ratty one that was owned by Rowan Atkinson and crashed several times. I shouldn't call it ratty. Apparently it came out of the factory the second time, one of the cleanest ones in existence. Yeah. But one with a pretty rough title. I think he got 14 or maybe 12.7, something like that for his. I might even be quoting the two numbers in two different currencies as it happens. But I mean, like, any of these are worth 15. The special ones are worth more, and the really special ones never trade hands. The long tails, the LMs, things like that. So,
well, road cars is something like 60, right? Like, there's not many to trade hands.
64 in one blank chassis. So theoretically, there could be a 65th if that happened. But then there's been GTLMs and GTs that have been turned back into road cars, plated, due to regional restrictions. So it's a little bit difficult, but there's not more than 106 of them.
There's not many.
Nope. And just the most amazing thing. It was to actually answer your question now, several minutes into my answer. The 2 days we spent with the car was incredible. I got to start it. I didn't get to drive it, which is fair, I think. I got to sit in it and start it and be around it and take pictures of it and experience it with my supreme leader, Ben Clymer, and with Josh. And it was just an amazing thing. And it was part of a really amazing collection from a guy that was like super chill, knew what he had, really loves cars, really loves watches. He just kind of got it. Like there was no pretense. It was like he showed up, he kind of said hi, and then he just like, here's the keys, here's the guy that manages my garage. I hope the shoot goes well. And he like peaced out for a while. It was a special thing.
Would you have driven it if you're allowed to? I don't feel comfortable driving anything over 15 personally.
Over 15 million, yeah.
Yeah, that's my line in the sand.
It's one thing to borrow or go on a press launch and drive even a $500,000 car that's insured, and like honestly, if you crash it, they're going to be mostly worried about you. It's a different thing to do that with what's like essentially a blue chip stock of the highest order in the automotive world. Like there's a couple cars worth more than this that are around, but none of them are this young. You know what I mean? Yeah. They got to be around a lot longer to get worth a lot more. But yeah, it's a special thing. I'm not sure to be honest. In the right frame of mind, or if it seemed like, it's also like you watch someone else drive a car like that, and you're constantly kind of scanning like, how hard is this? How scary is it? And it's my understanding the car is quite approachable, but also I'm sure a clutch service would be 30 plus.
Yeah,
it would have to go to Philadelphia from Virginia where we were, and then if it was if I really money shifted it or something like that, then it's going to have to go back to McLaren. And can you imagine being that guy? I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy more than I want to drive the car. So that's what it is.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you kind of grow up fantasizing about these cars and lusting for it, and then it's there in front of you, and for one reason or another that you've touched on really well, they become somewhat intimidating. I remember the first, weird thing to say, the first Ferrari I ever drove, and I was, it was in residential streets, and I was just shaking. I couldn't stop my arms from shaking, just excitement, and I don't know if it was adrenaline, but I was just so overwhelmed by the idea of being behind a 488 and having this thing in my hand. Yeah, but pales in comparison. Talking value, but still a very expensive car, and it's just a really interesting idea of kind of finally getting to the point of potentially being able to drive the ultimate dream, and then would I actually do it? But no, I think that's a really great answer.
The only thing where when I think back on it, I feel like there's a deficit where I might have missed out in some way. Is I have the framework for some very, very, very fast modern cars. And it would have been fun to have had a data point from 1992 or 95. I mean, this was the 95. Just to know, does this thing in third gear feel like faster than a DBS? Does it feel slower? Does it, once the clutch is engaged, does it take off like a 720, or is it different? What does it sound like? This is a V12, BMW V12 versus, in-house V8 from McLaren in a 720. I just like the idea of being able to have that that kind of card in my hand when you're chatting with other car guys. Like to say like, well, when you go the 2 to 3rd in an F1, it doesn't pull as hard as you might think, or it pulls way harder. Now it's just an unknown. It's a black spot, right? So,
and I definitely think that analogy of sort of the nerves or the respect for something that you would always dream for applies to watches as well. I recall being on Australia's always on the tail end of press trips typically.
Yeah.
So when we get
Canada too.
Oh yeah, we're the really important markets. So I remember it was a Lang minute repeater that had sort of done the rounds. Like it had gone through Singapore and Hong Kong, probably China and Japan. And by the time it got here, I think maybe it had been, repeated more times than it probably should have been. And I was the guy that picked it up and actuated it and goes, "Hey guys, you realize this isn't making any noise?" And they were fine with it. Like they it's obviously goes with the territory, and it's they sort of fixed it fairly quickly and knew what was going on with it. But I still had that moment of fear, like going, "This is not mine. This is 100% not my issue." but still, I pressed that button and nothing happened. So did I break
Your stomach
it?
just sinks.
Yeah. Oh, it's a horrible feeling. But I just wanted to sort of pivot back into the world of watches a little bit, if I could, and specifically the business side of it before we talk about the fun actual gear side. I wanted to chat about your sort of take on fairs and what's going on there. But before that, you've both worked for, I'd say, the leading light of the digital watch space. Hodinkee, Jason, you have forever, and James, a bit more recently. It's a question that I'm sure you get a lot, and I'm really interested to see how you answer it. What's it like working for Hodinkee? There's a lot of rumors and conspiracy theories sort of out, about that, Apple-like facade. Are they all true? Jason?
Well, my perspective has always been as a more of a remote worker. James is spending a lot more time in New York in the office there. But I think, there is a certain, I guess, the level to which Hodinkee has achieved in the watch space over 10 years is just incredible. And, love them or hate them, people have to respect what they've done for the industry and the position they sit at. And I think with that comes a certain level of excellence and some expectations that, when you go to a show or you get a certain meeting or you go on a press trip, if that name is dropped, it sort of garners some respect. I think on the other hand, everybody there works incredibly hard, and I think you don't get to that position in the industry without a lot of hard work. And though I haven't been in the trenches like James has been at Basel for a few years with Hodinkee kind of hammering stuff out at 3 a.m, that's the thing that people don't see, that really continues to make the site what it is. And since I was doing more day-to-day with Hodinkee, which I haven't done for a couple of years, they've just added some incredible staff in terms of, especially in the video department. The video production is just off the charts now. And I think that is what has been the real driver that has launched the site to a whole new level, that in the magazine.
And James, what would you add on that sort of front, having maybe the more recent office experience, I guess?
Yeah, I would say, in what it's like to work for Hodinkee is it's incredible. It's a team that's incredibly dedicated at any level. The editorial team is kind of on one floor in New York. You have the shop team on another floor. They're operating kind of on 2 different planes.
Can I just interrupt you for a second there? You've just said they've got floors. This is just think back to 10 years when you were writing for Watch Report and
and it was just me and Christian for sure. But Hodinkee started Ben, and then Ben
that's
and Steven,
amazing.
and Ben and Steven and Will, and Ben and Steven and Ashley, and like now it's 55 people or more. And it's people that are taking care of not one vertical but several. And I would say, and obviously I have a strong bias because I love these people, but they're doing an incredible job.
Yeah, I think we have a bit of a rule, Felix and I, where we just fanboy a little bit and talk a bit too much about Hodinkee on the show.
Well, it's
look. What Ben has built, and then what he's been able to share in terms of control with Will into the video team, an incredible video team, like Jason said. And also into Steven, and then now Joe and Jack, and into a diverse editorial team. What I have here is the ability to know, it's nice because on one hand, it's insanely busy. It's insanely busy all the time because the attitude is everything is possible if we work hard enough. And that's something I respect and sometimes begrudge, but mostly respect. Sometimes I want to sit and play Zelda and drink a whiskey on the couch. Other times you just want to grind, right?
Yeah.
And whether that's at Basel or Watches and Wonders or now at home in Toronto, because all that stuff is digital this year, at least I know that at any time, if I'm working hard, there's like 20 other people that are still working and pushing their dinner late and doing this. And that's it's literally just to make sure that the next day when you go onto your phone or onto the site, the coolest thing is waiting for you. You know, I got up with Heaton today at 8 a.m., which isn't that early or anything. It's not like a burden, but just as a piece of data to watch the Zinn presentation, and immediately wrote up that new U50, which is awesome.
Which is very cool.
And the nice thing is I still get to operate, and you know, I'm fairly tied into the staff, but the really sweet thing is I'm still able to operate as an enthusiast. So this is a watch that I like. Nobody asked any questions. I wrote a quick piece and it got published. And as long as the watch is incredible, we can certainly get to that. I think this is something that Zinn's needed for a while, and something that I would very much like to have on my own wrist. But from the perspective of what it's like to work at Hodinkee, is imagine being a deep enthusiast in something, your own vector, and then being given almost unlimited power to exploit that. Like, just do what you want. Just make sure that it's done really well.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. And I can certainly relate to, you know, you've made a few comments about you guys, how you work at fairs and at Basel. And that's, it must have been a few years ago now. I had a good chat to Stephen, and it was exclusively, in fact, now whenever I see Stephen, I don't ask about work. I ask about his organization. Like, I'm like, what are you guys doing now? And this is the way he talks about your schedule and how well it's all organized. It's,
and that's Stephen for sure.
It blows my mind. It's truly, you know, I think that's the secret sauce in some ways.
It's impressive. It's impressive.
And so I'd like to sort of, on that fair topic, I don't want to go too far into this, but just your sort of top line thoughts on what we're going to see next year, based on, you know, how this year's been and all the troubles in the years leading up to it. What's your sort of 12-month out prediction for 2021 watch fairs? Let's start with you, James, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I think we've already seen the kind of circling of the wagons for the LVMH and the kind of FHH groups. You know, they're going to hit Geneva as hard as they can with all the best stuff that they possibly can. I think that there's going to be an impetus to flex as hard as possible. 2021 will be probably a pretty big year. If there's brands that were kind of planning to eventually, you know, maybe they've got a 3-year or 5-year rollout, I think they're going to push pretty hard to make sure that next year is special from an in-person perspective. And then we see the growth of that show as well, of Watches and Wonders Geneva. I would say things look really strong on that front. They're responding to the quote, whether you want to call it a threat or just kind of changing waters or whatever, but they're responding to it. As for Basel, I would say that it's actually a little bit early to kind of make that call, because there's still players that could repower Basel if they decided to.
Agree.
Are you talking about Swatch Group there, or?
Yeah, for sure. So Swatch Group left with I think they left with strong reason. But I also think they could come back with just as strong a reason. That could be their show. It would re-centralize the concept of a Basel fair back to Basel. And I think that they could do that if they want to continue Time to Move, which is for those who aren't aware, their own kind of internal press roadshow, which would have been going on a few weeks ago. If they want to continue that, I could see that being as a viable option if their plan is 10 or 20 years long. But if they're really looking to be light on their feet, there is an argument to be made. It's something that you might want to ask someone deeper into the industry than myself, but I feel like there's an argument to be made for looking at the show as a pretty good way to return to some form of stated power.
Yeah, sure. And Jason, what's your sort of quick take on this?
Well, I'd be curious to find out, you know, for the better part of a decade, you know, calendars have been revolving around the shows, you know, SHH, then Basel. And with all the recent shuffle, it's made me think, you know, to the average watch buyer or watch enthusiast, consumer, or even Hodinkee reader or podcast listener, you know, has the change that we saw this year with Watches and Wonders doing this online launch and you know, all the articles spilling out on Hodinkee like the day of, with mainly press photos. Does are people? Do people care as much anymore? Or are we just too close to it? Are we, looking at it too closely through a microscope and kind of losing the big picture as to whether these shows are really that important? I don't do a lot of news coverage of watches anymore, so I don't see the fairs as important in my life, other than to get a chance to meet up and catch up with guys like you, who I never see otherwise.
Yeah, totally agree.
That I would be sad in that respect, but I just think for the average person, is getting the news and seeing a few photos of the watches enough, and does it matter if it comes via a live sort of bloated show or just a bunch of articles on a blog? I don't know.
Sure, and it's interesting. You've sort of been saying you're less involved in the fairs. Is that
what's taking up your time?
Yeah, are you doing something else? Are you writing the great American novel?
As a matter of fact, I am. Thank you for the plug.
Yeah, that was a seamless segue. I think that's what you'll find.
Perfect. Yeah, right.
As someone who does this a lot, man, if we didn't call it out, it would be seamless.
Yeah, right.
Oof.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
Where can we follow it on the internet?
This, this coronavirus pandemic has been good for one thing, and that is just sheer creativity. I've just been kind of hunkered down. It's been my primary focus. I was doing some kind of marketing consulting stuff and some commercial photography projects with my wife for a couple of watch brands prior to this, and then everything kind of got shut down. And so I was able to put my primary focus into writing this novel that I started last October. And so that's kind of how I spend my days, between the Tuesdays that James and I record the Grey NATO. I've just been hammering on this novel that I started, 6-7 months ago, I guess. And it's coming along pretty well. I don't know what publishing scenario I'm going to land on for this, but
yeah, sure.
I'll probably self-publish it with some sort of on-demand printer at some point. I'm aiming for the end of the year. But it's been a great experience.
So I can, I think we've sort of chatted a bit about it. It's that sort of old school adventure, romp.
Well, hold on. It's called Depth Charge.
It's called Depth Charge, which that title I kind of settled on. It has a deeper meaning than just what people might expect. But yeah, I'm kind of aiming for that classic thriller genre. The types of books that I've enjoyed reading: the Ian Fleming novels, the Alistair MacLeans, the Clive Cusslers. Nothing too highbrow, but with enough historical and kind of technical details that make readers think and maybe learn a few things. So,
what watch does the protagonist wear?
Well, I've changed it several times. I realize that a lot of the people that potentially might read this book know me from my watch writing, and I get questions all the time, like which watch. So I'm like, I started with one watch, now I've switched to another one. I don't want to go the Doxa route because that's been done by somebody already, and Rolex felt a little bit too predictable. So I don't know. We'll see.
I could suggest maybe sort of put it out to tender to see if you can get an endorsement.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Great deal, yeah.
This book is sponsored by Seiko. Yeah, right.
Yeah. The Prospect series.
Oh man, the brave new world of publishing. That'd be great.
My other question is, speaking of product placements, is there a villain?
Oh yes, there is. Yes.
Is there a chance there can be a henchman in there named Felix Schultz?
That's a really good.
That's a perfect name. That's a great name.
This is an easy.
I know.
I might change my villain's name to Felix Schultz. If
you do that, I want this to happen very much. We can workshop it later.
Oh, it's fantastic! I love that idea.
So when can we expect to hear more about it?
Well, I've kind of set the end of the year as my kind of drop dead. So I suddenly realized that I need to work backwards from that and figure out when I need to have my final draft done and have it copy edited. And there was some research that needs to be done for certain aspects of the book that require some travel, which has been problematic this year, obviously. So,
of course.
But I've been getting input from some experts in some various fields that feature in the book, and that's been kind of fun to do. And but yeah, I'm aiming for the end of the year, so I need to backtrack and dig into the publishing side of it and get some cover art made
Get the admin done.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll obviously link up. I think there's just an Instagram page to follow, but shoot over anything else that we can share with the super fans.
Much appreciated.
James, yeah, no, of course. And I look forward to reading about the evil Felix Schultz and just see how it stacks up to the real life evil Felix Schultz. Yeah. We've got a lot to cover still. James, I'll bounce over to you. You know, you're sort of 20 to 25% of the reason that I shit on Leica. So
I'm really sorry about
my
that.
wallet thanks you for that.
Sorry. I mean, it has no effect on me, so not really.
No. I think there was a DM probably 12 months ago. So what do you think of the Q? You take a really nice clean wrist shot. What's the number one tip for sort of nailing it to the level that people kind of see?
Yeah, I think the big thing that, and again, it's a matter of style, not a right or wrong. But I would say that if you're whatever you're shooting on, and for years and years and years, I shot Canon, and so a wrist shot would have been on the 2.5 compact macro, the 50 millimeter, and then with the Q, and you have a Q2, correct? Yeah, so I'm still shooting on a Q. I haven't made the jump yet. Simply because I'm actually a little bit scared of the file size. I live in a world where I actually have SSD velcroed to the back of my MacBook monitor.
Yep.
Because I'm operating about a 600 gig Lightroom catalog in reference only. So if you're deep into Lightroom, you'll know what that means. But it's referring to files that aren't even on my computer.
Yeah.
So you just see this kind of blurry thumb shot.
Wow.
But I've been at this for a long time, and the plus of the Leica is that it's just so flexible. So if you want to shoot cars, you can do that. I'm speaking of the Q specifically. If you want to shoot cars, you can do that. You want to shoot people, it does a pretty good job for people. If you want to shoot travel, it's glorious. Look at Brett Curry's work on Instagram. And then if you want to shoot watches, you rotate a little flange on the lens itself because it's a fixed lens. And suddenly you can, I don't actually know what the depth is, but it's certainly close enough to get really close to the watch. Certainly enough so that if you've read any of my live photos reviews from the last year, I've had the camera for about 13 months. That's what I shot it with. So you get a big file, and that would be the plus of the Q2 is you get all that more resolution to punch in if you want to do some macro effect. Not true macro, but I just kind of adore the Q, and I would say the biggest thing is that I see if I see an image and I roll my eyes or I kind of flatly ignore it, it's because there's reflections on the crystal. So I think whether you're shooting with your iPhone or you're shooting with a Leica or you're shooting with your Canon, your Nikon, your Sony, it honestly at a certain point makes no difference as long as the camera allows you to get close enough where I can see the detail of the watch. Use your body. I have a big head, so I can use my head. Use elements of your frame, or grab like a book or a black piece of cardboard and just block the reflections. That would be level 1 for me. I think if you want to go level 2 or level 1.5, put on a white T-shirt or a white button-up when you shoot the shot, because then you're wearing a reflector. So if you go back and find photos of me at Baselworld, I'm very commonly, not always, but commonly wearing one of 2 or 3 white button-ups. And that's because I could unbutton my jacket, do a roughly vertical wrist shot, and the white of my shirt would fill in the dark side of the watch, typically the underside of the watch. And it's just that sort of thing.
You're blowing my mind here. You're blowing my mind. I'd never thought of the clothing angle. I love this, and I think you've really beautifully summed up the appeal of the kind of the Q and the Q2, and it's exactly why I bought it. And one thing you mentioned was the travel, and that leads to the next topic I want to quickly dive into. But adventure is sort of front and center of TGN, and I think maybe one for you, Jason. But what is an adventure watch, and what is your personal adventure watch?
The criteria for an adventure watch these days. Functionality has been pretty well sorted since the 50s with dive watches and chronographs and, moving into multifunction watches and GPS watches and things like that. So you set that aside and the criteria really becomes quite simple. And that is simply to survive whatever you wear it to do, whatever adventures you're going on. If the watch can survive it, there you go. And I think the main purpose of then wearing a watch isn't so much to, track time or track your speed or anything like that. It's to become that collector of memories or some sort of a memento of the adventures that you're going on, or maybe inspiration for something in the future. And I mean, I think with that in mind, then it comes down to personal taste. And for me, I tend to gravitate towards watches that have some sort of brand credibility or a cool history. Like, I mean, it's a cliche, but Rolex with the bottom of the ocean, the top of Everest, etc. You just, I tend to I'm a bit of a romantic. So when I put on a Rolex Submariner and go diving, it's like all of that comes with me. And then when I can sit at my desk the next week, I can look down and be wearing that same watch that a week ago I was in some exotic corner of the world diving a shipwreck or something. And so I like that. I like that it becomes imbued with the stuff you do, and therefore the watch has to be able to survive that. As well as, I think having a good reputation for having a good reputation for reliability is really important too, because if you're taking a watch, traveling, for instance, or up a mountain or something, the last thing you want is for it to stop running or something like that. So, the brand, the usual suspects like, Seiko, Rolex, Bremont is a great brand for, making rugged mechanical watches, Doxa. But my go-to,
MB2 right now.
Yeah, the MB2. I mean, it's such a great versatile watch. I mean, you could even take it swimming, diving, great sort of hiking watch, cycling, whatever. My current go-to has been CWC, the Cabot Watch Company brand from England that supplied the MOD for 40 years or whatever with diving watches and chronographs to the pilots. And they don't get a lot of exposure, but it's kind of a favorite of mine. It's run by a couple of brothers now out of London, and they make some good, solid pieces. I also think that lately I've been kind of liking quartz watches a lot more. I know that's not a popular opinion, but quartz or kinetic and solar watches are a really great option for adventuring or just everyday wear. And obviously Citizen and Seiko make great examples in CWC, but the watch that I've been kind of looking at lately that's caught my eye that never did before was like the old Omega Seamaster, like Diver 300 in the quartz edition. Like a NATO strap. What a bomb-proof watch. What a great watch to wear for anything, high quality, Swiss quartz, classic design. That'd be a pretty sweet adventure watch, I think.
And maybe you've just answered this question, but is there something, I mean, like you've said, people get sort of fixated with the details that they maybe don't necessarily need in these sort of action-oriented timepieces. Is there something people should pay more attention to? Like, is there, like, from a real-world perspective, is there a sort of an element of the design that matters that the designers or the wearers just forget about?
Well, I got this question a while back, and it was like, what's the most important element of a dive watch? And I'll focus on diving watches. And I always give this answer that to me, it's always been the strap. A strap is so important, and people often say, oh, a NATO strap is going to keep the watch on your wrist if you break a spring bar and whatever. But like, you could also say that if you wear a watch with an integrated bracelet, the spring bar doesn't take such torque because it's not being rotated or bent at any point. So a good bracelet watch is nice, but the good rubber straps on a Seiko or a solid NATO strap or just a good bracelet. But loom, legibility, stuff that doesn't get snagged and caught and rip off. I mean, I think the one thing that you see with dive watches a lot is the bezel flies off. I mean, I even had that happen with my Submariner when I was sailing with it. Got snagged and tugged off the watch. And I remember being at like an oyster farm up in Alaska, and the two guys that were working there, the one guy was like really proud of his Luminox watch, and he went to show me how the bezel turned, and it was completely jammed up with salt and sand and whatever else. And it's like the bezel seems to be the really weak link in a lot of dive watches.
Interesting.
So it's kind of the stuff that contacts the outside world, whether you're snagging it on a backpack strap or stuff like that.
Yeah, or the spring bar breaks or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that leads me to, I've got this as a sort of one for you, Jason. You're perhaps the world's foremost advocate of the classic Bund strap.
Followed by Paul Newman, obviously.
Yeah, well, you know,
Spiritual advisor.
who wore it first? Yeah, and on your side, James, you're maybe the reason that Breitling is redoing the aerospace later this year.
Oh, wow.
Is it the aerospace or the chronospace they're doing?
Chronospace.
Chronospace?
I mean, they recently redid the Chronomat.
I've not heard this news. That's pretty exciting.
No, the Anadigi ones. I think that's the rumor at least.
Wow, that'd be cool.
Wow. Well, there you go. Breaking news.
And probably embargo.
No, I think Zach had something on a live thing on a blog to watch, so it's out there. It's fine.
Well, if Zach said it live, you're solid.
When are you guys willing?
He's a king.
Yeah, that's what I go with. When are you guys willing to admit that you are the real tastemakers in the watch world?
I mean, never. No. If you know me, you know there's no taste making for sure. I mean, a clock.
I don't know.
That clock is right twice a day. Every now and then I might get lucky, but there's no taste here.
But there's sort of like, I know I'm joking, but there's a bit of a serious underlying thing. Like the Bund and the aerospace for you, they're not popular choices. Like it takes a sort of a level of confidence to go your own way. What do you like about these sort of? What is it that attracts you to this? If it's not the herd mentality.
Well, I mean, I think with the Bund. It comes back to what I was saying earlier about just what you like to look down on your wrist, and certain watches just look so good with a big wide
Redford
leather cuff underneath it. Certain watches don't, but Redford with the Doxa in 3 Days of the Condor. I mean, if you haven't seen that movie, check out his watch in that
great movie.
I just think that you kind of define your own personal style, and I've reached a ripe old age where I think I kind of know what that is for myself. It's Blundstone boots and a pair of jeans and a Bush shirt and a Bund Strap. I think it kind of just all ties together. It's what I'm comfortable in, and it's what I like the look of. And I always find it humorous how people get so polarized about a leather strap on a dive watch, or how awful a Bund Strap looks, or I think there was a writer at Time and Tide who posted an article, like a whole rant about Bund straps.
Oh,
It's like, just chill out.
Shots fired.
Yeah, right.
Shots fired into the air.
It's pretty spicy.
You're not hitting anyone.
We had a chat about.
Blanks.
Shooting blanks.
Come on, dude. The stakes have never been lower. If you're aiming your bow at the Bund Strap.
I know. Well, yeah, it's funny. I have a mate who likes to wear his Patek Philippe Grand Comp, the salmon dial on a $7.99 cheap NATO strap, just to I think to trigger people like that.
Right.
Yeah, which is fun. But look, one thing we haven't hit on yet, and I'm cautious of time, is gear. And look, James, if I read your Hodinkee masthead, it says you're always equipped with a watch, a camera, and a smile.
Absolutely.
And I hope you're smiling after an hour of chatting to Felix and I. But TGN is all about gear, and both Felix and I have got some great recommendations from it. But curious to hear what the unsung heroes of the gear world are, and what you guys are relying on, particularly kind of now as an everyday carry.
I'm definitely reaching for watches on NATOs. Kind of a Doxa heavy portfolio lately, which is fun. Just because I'm not tracking a second time zone, I'm not going anywhere. I would say the other kind of unsung hero is like a solid, and I'm not optioning it as your main watch. I'm not saying that you need to make this something that replaces your Doxa, your Tudor, your Seiko, whatever. But as your B watch, as your tool watch for staying fit or staying active or keeping in touch with your phone, that sort of thing, like Garmin, I would say would be the kind of unsung hero of my existence. On the higher end, I have a 42 millimeter Phoenix 6, which is it's a legitimately expensive watch, but it's really nice. I think it's one of the most compelling smartwatches in the space, outside of the Apple Watch. And obviously you get all of the fitness tracking. It's in a 42 millimeter sizing, which is not common. A lot of these are 47. Just to get a screen that's readable at 42 is nice. And because it is kind of a basic screen compared to something like an iPhone or most Android smartwatches, you get an incredible battery life, which I like quite a bit. But if you're living an existence where you want to exercise most days, which I'm a component, I support at a high level. If you're stuck inside, try and do something to take your mind off of the lack of physical motion. And there's hardly a better option than just a simple home workout, and that helps with that. And I would say maybe this is a time to turn off your step counter if you have it on whatever device, because you're getting 20 or 30 to go from the bed to the kitchen, you know what I mean? So that's what it is at this time. But the Garmin really, I would say the Instinct, which they've offered for a really entry-level G-Shock sort of price point, is an incredible watch for the money. And because it doesn't have the fancy screen, the battery lasts even longer, and it has a lot of the various fitness tracking and everything else. And I would say from a functional standpoint, from a tool watch, a modern tool watch for a work from home era, this has been really, really crucial to me. And then the rest of it is like kind of, I don't know, like less interesting stuff. Like I have both of the Sony kind of higher end noise canceling earphones. I'm currently wearing the WH-1000s, but I have the WFs as well if you don't want to get on a Zoom call with a giant pair of headphones on. Pro tip, this deep into quarantine, you don't have to do video. Anyone who asks is being rude. As a Canadian, I'm just putting it out there. Like if you get on a call and you just go like no video, audio only, and mute immediately, that's the move. Just go that way. But a decent, yeah, for sure.
Wow. Yeah, I blame the internet connection. Sorry, I can't do video.
I mean, like as far as like really important gear, I would say anything that allows you to feel comfortable, happy, and flexible. That's it. So if that's
nice,
no, please.
And Jason, what would be your top line gear essential that maybe is unsung?
Zip ties, cable ties.
Yeah,
travel with those a lot. And then I also like to have a couple of carabiners, those sort of mountaineering clips. One good kind of solid locking one that can hold some weight, and then a few kind of just cheap ones that you can clip stuff on a backpack, like a water bottle or anything like that. And whenever I travel, I always take, I don't care if it's a dive trip or anything else, I always take a dive mask and swim trunks. So, you
never know.
If you're somewhere hiking and there's a lake, you've got your trunks and a mask. If you drop something in the water, you've got a dive mask, or you can swim in a hotel pool with a dive mask. Might look a little hardcore, but you can do it. Other than that, James and I always swear by the Patagonia Nanopuff, which is the really lightweight insulated synthetic jacket that you can make into a pillow, or you can use it as a blanket on the airplane, or wards off a chill in the evening. And then, of course, Blundstone boots. I mean, come on.
Tasmania's finest.
Blunnies, yeah. Right.
Well, I love it. Well, guys, thank you so much for jumping on the call. You're probably the two only people in the world that can have me listening for 13 minutes talking about knives, which I did earlier this week on the latest TGN episode.
I'm deep into knives. Don't get me started.
Oh, I know. And let's not open that kettle of fish today. We'll save that for your show. But thank you both for coming on. Felix and I have absolutely loved it. It's been a treat, and we'll be sure to shoot it over to you guys. Felix, anything else before I hit stop recording and we?
Well, I think maybe we'll throw this over to one of the guys. What's the best way to follow yourselves and to stay on top of the Grey NATO in case people aren't?
I'm at Jason Heaton on Instagram, and James is at JE Stacey. And you can follow the show at the Grey NATO on Instagram. That's probably the best way to kind of keep track. And then the Grey NATO currently, during the pandemic shutdown around the world, is being run weekly, and we always put that up on Hodinkee.com. You can always find it there if you're looking for it. So,
perfect.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I actually I came up with a final quote for today that I thought would be relevant for us here. If you don't mind,
if
you'll indulge me.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. Well, I just came across this today, and I thought I got really excited about saying it on the show here. So this is from Charles M. Schulz, who is the creator of the Peanuts cartoon strip, and he said, He said, "Don't worry about the world coming to an end today. It's already tomorrow in Australia."
Guys, we've got some bad news for you.
That is 50 minutes of my life, or however long it ends up being, that I'm going to relive over and over. They just are legends. Andy, what do you think?
100%. I didn't really want that to end. It's always great to connect with those fellas. As we said, we've had the pleasure of hanging out with them many a time over the years, and didn't get to catch up with them at the watch fairs.
Especially, so this is the next best thing. We can just sort of, have a little bit of chat, have a little bit of catch up and a little bit of on-air gossip. We didn't really gossip too much though, did we?
No, not too much. And look, as we said throughout the show, the Grey NATO is their fantastic podcast. Check it out. They both make, many appearances on, obviously, Hodinkee Radio, on Hodinkee as well, writing some fantastic articles and some fantastic photography.
Stay tuned for Jason's, novel news. But in terms of how to get in touch with them, if you've never heard of any of those things before, let's go with the Grey NATO, which is the Grey NATO on Instagram.
On Insta. What about James?
He is, let me just pull it up now. I think it's just it's Jestacey. J-E Stacey.
Boom. And what about Jason Heaton?
That's just Jason Heaton.
At Jason Heaton.
At Jason Heaton.
Well, as always, thank you to Major Tom Media for putting this show together.
More than that, thank you to the Grey NATO. Thank you to you, Andy.
Thank you, Felix. We'll see you next time, guys.
Bye.